Introducing the glove pressure garment. In this video, we'll be looking at the measurement, design, and fabrication of the glove. However, it's important to note that for many cases, a full glove may not be required, and perhaps a gauntlet would be quicker and more appropriate for your client. A gauntlet is made the same way as the glove, but just excludes the finger pieces. Assessment of the location of the scarring can help one decide if a gauntlet or a full glove is required. A gauntlet will be fabricated for scars of the distal wrist, dorsal and/or volar aspects of the hand and/or the thumb, extending just proximal to the MCPJs. A glove will be fabricated for scars of the distal wrist, dorsal and/or volar aspects of the hand, as well as the inclusion of the fingers.
Going to be taking the measurements and drawing the pattern for the glove or the gauntlet. So ask your patient to place their hand on a piece of paper. You want the wrist and the index finger to be in a line, so as straight as possible, as this will be the fold on your pressure garment material. You also want the thumb in a slightly extended position and each of the fingers slightly abducted and the hand kept flat on the piece of paper. When you're tracing around the hand, ensure that your pen is held vertically to the page and held flush against the skin when tracing around. Okay, and also ensure that you go as deep into the web spaces as you can. Okay, then ask your patient to keep their hand on the page so that you can mark off some key areas. So the first one you're going to do is here at the base of the 5th metacarpal at the wrist. You are also going to measure where the metacarpal phalangeal joint is, the MCP joint of the little finger and of the index finger. Just making a marking in between the first web space and on either side of the IP joint of the thumb, the metacarpal phalangeal joint of the thumb, and then at the CMC joint of the thumb. Once you have those markings, you can then ask your patient to take their hand off the page and just ensure that everything is marked clearly. Okay, so once you have traced your pattern of your patient's hand, you can then decide if you want to take circumferential measurements or not. So if the patient's hand is not edematous, I normally find that it works well enough if you just use the traced pattern of the patient's hand and add about a 1/2 centimeter extra on the ulnar side of the hand to allow for your seam. However, if you do find that the patient's hand is quite edematous, you might need to take circumferential measurements around the metacarpal phalangeal joints, around the wrist, and then also if your glove is extending onto the forearm, you might need to take some circumferential measurements of the forearm too. So to do that, we would just take the tape measure, put it around the patient's metacarpal phalangeal joints, and then without squeezing, just take that measurement. So hers would be 18. Then around the wrist, same, you're going to do it over the ulnar styloid, and that would be 14.5. And then if the patient needs the glove to extend onto the forearm, you could take further circumferential measurements up to the point where you want the glove or gauntlet to end. Okay, so I'm now going to show you how we would be designing the thumb piece. So the first step you'll do is you're going to draw a straight line between your CMC joint, that marking, and your marking of your IP joint of the thumb. This is going to be on the fold of your material. Okay, so if you want to indicate to yourself, just as a reminder, sometimes I say just put little crosses over it so you know that that part will be on the fold of the pressure garment material. The next line you're going to draw is across the IP joint of the thumb, extending it about a 1/2 centimeter so that you allow for a seam. So you'll draw that one, and then you need to draw an arced line across this first web space. So you can also extend this metacarpophalangeal joint marking out by about 1/2 centimeter, and then just freehand you need to draw an arced line to mark off where your web space of your thumb piece will be. And then the last thing you're going to do is make another arc over the thinner eminence, and this we normally suggest that you do about 1/2 centimeter below the metacarpophalangeal joint. Just for if you are making a gauntlet, this is where it would stop, so you need to allow enough space to sew that onto your pattern, onto your glove. So this you just do an arced line to join that over there. Okay. Alright, so that is your thumb piece that you've now designed. If you are making a gauntlet, you can then draw a line straight across your metacarpophalangeal joints, and that would indicate where you would cut your pattern for a gauntlet, as it's not necessary to include the fingers. However, if your fingers are involved and you need to make a full glove, this is when you are then going to extend straight lines for each of the fingers to show when you'll be cutting out the material. So I'm going to show you here. This is our straight line that we set on the radial side of the wrist up to the index finger. Okay, so this again will be on the fold of your material. So when we cut out our pattern, we'll show you in a minute, your thumb piece is going to be separate to the rest of your glove. Okay, so draw your straight vertical line from the radial side of the wrist up to the index finger, and then you're going to draw straight vertical lines for each of the fingers, making sure that they meet in the web space. If you notice that some of the sort of parts of the finger where the knuckles are on that fall in or out of the lines, that's okay, don't worry about that. It is accommodated when we do the gussets in a moment. Okay, so each of these will be extended, making sure that they meet in the web space. And draw them quite a bit longer on your patterns. We can always cut them down later when we're sewing, but it's better to have it longer than too short. Okay, and this little finger I've noticed here is abducted quite a bit, so I'm just going to move it in slightly. Okay, and then we can do this one from your metacarpophalangeal joint extending to the top of the finger. Okay, so those would be your finger markings. Then just to remember, same as what we did here in the thumb piece, you want to give enough space in your material for your sewing or for your seam. So we're going to move it out slightly, and when you cut it out of your material, just allow yourself about 1/2 centimeter, and you can bring that one into the little finger like that. Okay, and this is what you would cut out of your pattern, remembering that when you cut it out, the thumb piece will be separate, but we'll go over. Okay, I'm now going to show you how we cut out the pattern for the glove. Remember that if you're making the gauntlet, you can cut across this dotted line over here, as you don't need the fingers to be included. But for the glove, we're going to cut along outside of the pattern. We can just cut along the tops of the fingers, as we'll have to adjust these lengths when we fit the glove onto the patient. You can just cut the web spaces. And this is the part that you need to remember, that you're going to cut the thumb piece separately to this part of the pattern. So you'll cut along this arc of the thinner eminence, and then down for the hand. Okay, so that's the one part of your pattern, and then this last part here, we'll just cut along this arc. along your straight line. And that's your second part of the pattern. Okay, I'm now going to show you how we're going to measure and design the gussets needed for the glove. So 3 gussets are needed, and they are inserted to accommodate for the width of the fingers and to allow an even circumferential pressure around the fingers. So to measure the length of the gusset, you're going to use the longest finger, and that's normally the middle finger. You're going to place the ruler at the crease of the base of the finger and measure to the tip of the finger. So for her, it's 7.5 centimeters. For the width of the gusset, you'll use the width of the largest finger, also normally the middle finger. Make sure you get it into the web space and measure the width. So most patients will be between 1.5 and 2 centimeters. Okay, I'm now going to show you how you can draw your pattern for the gusset using the measurements you've just taken. So for Fiona, the length of the longest finger was 7.5 centimeters. So you're going to draw that onto the page, and you're going to make a right-angled L design using those measurements. Okay, so I'm doing her other 7.5 centimeters. You then use the width of the largest finger, and that will be the width of your gusset on your pattern. So for her, it was 1.5 centimeters. Draw that there, and another 1.5 centimeters on this side. There, and then you're just going to join them, keeping them parallel. Put it all there, and there. Okay, so this will be the gusset pattern you'll use for all 3 of the fingers. If you want to double check that your web space is correct, you can measure the patient's deepest web space, which is normally the index finger. Okay, so for her it would be 2 centimeters, and you can check that that matches your pattern of this diagonal measurement of 2 centimeters. Okay, and cutting out the gusset, just need to cut straight along the lines that you draw. Okay, and there is your gusset pattern, and you can use this same pattern for all 3 of the gussets needed. Okay, so we're now going to be cutting out the material for the glove. It's important to remember that we've got 3 different parts or sections that we're going to be cutting out separately before we sew them all together. So I'm going to start with the main part of the glove, which I've placed on a piece of material, remembering that the stretch goes around the circumference of the hand, and it's also placed on a fold. So you can see the stretch of the material in this direction. I'm going to place the pattern on the fold with the thumb piece lined up nicely like that. So I'm going to pin it, and then I'm going to cut it out. Cutting out the material for the glove, don't cut out that thumb piece. We'll cut that out after we've attached the thumb piece onto the glove. Okay, we're now going to be cutting out the thumb piece on the material. So again, remember to place it on a fold, and you want your stretch to be around the circumference of the thumb. Okay, so I'm going to pin and cut that out. Okay, we're now going to be cutting out the 3 gussets that we need for the glove. You're going to choose a piece of material and place it with the stretch going in the horizontal direction. And you're going to put your gusset pattern onto the material in a V shape. This then allows for the stretch to be evenly placed along the whole gusset. If we were, for instance, to place the gusset in this direction, only one length would have stretch and the other wouldn't have a stretch. And that then causes the fingers of the glove to twist and rotate. So you're going to place your 3 gussets in that direction. So I'm going to pin and cut them out now. Now have your 3 gussets cut out as well. Okay, so before we remove the pattern from the material, you want to just make your markings where your thumb piece is going to be sewn onto the glove. So you'll see that when you are going to sew the thumb piece, you want it to sit over there on the glove. So you just make those chalk markings. And then we're going to remove the pattern. And then remember which hand you're making the glove for, because you're going to be cutting 1 centimeter length on each web space, only on the dorsum of the hand. Okay, so this pattern was made for the right hand. So on the dorsum, we're going to be cutting 1 centimeter slits into the material. So you'll take your ruler and just mark 1 centimeter on each of the web spaces. Okay, then open up your pattern so you make sure that you don't accidentally cut through to the volar side of the glove, and we're going to cut those slits. Okay, so now that we've got our markings and we've cut the slits in for the web spaces, I'm going to be sewing my hem at the bottom, and I'm also going to be sewing this arc of the thumb piece closed. So at this point, this is the only part that you're going to be sewing on the thumb piece. Alright, so now we're going to be sewing the hem of the glove. So just remember, when you're sewing the hem, you want the dull side to be on the facing on the outside, and the shiny side on the inside. So fold your hem so that you start seeing the shiny side like that. Okay. Okay, so now we've done our hem. And we're going to move on to sewing the arc of our thumb piece. So I'm just going to pin it to keep it together. And there we go, we've sewn that closed, but we've kept that part of it open. Okay, so what I normally do at this point is I then try the thumb piece on the client just to make sure that it fits well. So we can see here that it's a little bit loose around the thumb, so I'm just going to take that in a little bit at this point so we make sure that this part fits well before we continue with the glove. Okay, so now we've finished the hem at the bottom of the glove. We've also closed off the thumb piece by sewing along that arc. So now we need to sew the thumb piece onto the glove. So we use our markings that we had from our pattern that we chalked onto the glove. And you're going to position the thumb piece onto the fold of the material. It's important to note and always remember which hand you're making the glove for, as we're going to be shifting that thumb piece over slightly to accommodate for the natural position that the thumb lies in. So when your hand is at rest, your thumb is naturally in a slight opposition, and it also allows then for easier manipulation with your fingers, and it's a lot more comfortable. So you're going to position your thumb piece on your markings, and then you're going to move it 1 centimeter to the left. So because we're making a right hand, you'll move it 1 centimeter to the left, as you can see here. So it'll allow for that movement. And if you were making a glove for the left hand, you'd move it 1 centimeter to the right. So I'm going to pin that in place and then sew it. Okay, so now you've got your thumb piece that's that's sewn onto your glove. At this point, we're now going to cut out the hole for the thumb to fit into. Okay, so careful when you do this to pinch your two material pieces away from one another as to not cut into the thumb piece. So I pinch that, make a small slit, and then I can cut my circle for the thumb piece. Like that, and that then allows the thumb to fit into the thumb piece like that. Okay, so we're now going to be sewing our gussets into the web spaces of the fingers for the glove. This can be quite a challenging part of making the glove, so just work through it one gusset at a time and we'll go through it step by step. So just to remind you about the dorsum of the glove, it has that additional 1 centimeter slit that's cut into each of the web spaces. This accommodates for that slant that we have in the web spaces on the dorsum of the hand. It just allows for a better fit of the glove when putting it on. So what we do first is we're going to turn the glove over so that the shiny side is facing upward. We're going to be working on this side of the glove, as this is now the dorsum. We'll take our gusset, and you're also going to find the shiny side. So this is the dull. We want the shiny side of the gusset to be facing shiny side of the glove. So the first thing that you do is you're going to place it along the length of the finger, making sure that the corner of the gusset is right in the corner of the slit of your web space. Okay, we're going to pin that in place, and we're going to sew down the length of that first finger. Okay, so when you start sewing the first gusset, always make sure that you start from the base of the web space and sew your way along to the top of the finger. Okay, so we've now finished sewing the first part of the first gusset to the finger. We're now going to be sewing this edge to the edge of that finger. So what you want to do is you want to pick them up and you're going to pinch the two shiny sides so that they face each other like that. So if I turn it over, I can see here, I'm going to pinch it so that I'm going to sew along the length of that finger. Right, so we've now finished the first gusset and we're going to be placing the second gusset into position. So just again, make sure that you find your shiny side of the gusset, and the shiny sides are always going to be facing each other. So you place that right at the base of the web space and we're going to pin and sew that in place. Okay, so we've now attached the first side of our gusset onto the finger, and we're now exactly the same as what we did for this first gusset. We're going to pinch the two shiny sides together, turn it over so you can get a good grip, and now we're going to be sewing down the length of that finger, always starting at the base of the web space and working your way to the top of the finger. Okay, so we now have the second gusset sewn into place, and we can do the last and final gusset. So again, you're going to take your gusset, find the shiny side, lay it shiny sides touching, and make sure that it fits all the way into the base of that web space. And we're going to sew that length down. Okay, so we've now sewn the first edge of our last gusset, and the same as what we've done for the other two is you're going to put the two shiny sides together, you're going to pinch them, and we're going to sew along the length of that finger. Okay, so we now have sewn our 3 gussets into the dorsal web spaces of the glove. We now need to sew the web spaces on the volar side to the gusset so we can close the glove. So we can fold it over like this and then find the gusset that matches the web space on the volar surface. Okay, again, you want to make sure that you are matching the 2 bottom ends of the web spaces to one another, and we're going to sew along the length of this gusset. Okay, so we've now closed off our first finger, so I'll just show you how it fits on the hand. So you can see there the gusset has closed along the inside of the finger. Okay, so we're now going to be sewing along the length of the second finger. Okay, so we're now going to sew along the length of the second finger, so you'll find the inner gusset and the finger that align, and we're going to sew along the length of that finger. Okay, so now we've got our gusset sewn in over there, and we need to match it up with the next volar web space. So we're going to be lining up the corner of the gusset with the length of this finger, and we'll sew that length. Okay, so we've just sewn along the length of this finger, so now the same as what we've done for all the others, we're going to now join those 2 parts together, the gusset and the finger. Okay, we're now going to be finishing up the ring finger and then sewing the gusset to the little finger. So just as we've done with all the others, you're going to find the gusset that matches the finger, and we're going to sew along the length of that finger like that. Okay, so now we've got our gussets sewn into all 3 of the web spaces. So now we're going to try it on the patient. There we go. And you can see the last thing that we need to do now is to close up the side. So we're going to sew along the length of this little finger and the ulnar side of the hand and wrist. Okay, so you can now see that we've fitted the glove on the patient and it's complete sewn along the ulnar side of the hand. It's at this point that you can then check to make sure that the tightness is correct. If there's any areas that are loose, you can take them in to make sure that it's got an appropriate fit. One of the reasons why we have chosen or we prefer this design for the glove is it allows for the stitch to be on the outside. So if you do need to adjust the fingers, as you can see on this one, we could take it in a little over here. It makes it a lot easier to adjust evenly around each of the fingers, as you can then take in on both on the dorsum and on the volar side to make sure that the circumference is always even around the fingers. So I'm going to take my chalk here and just feel where the base of the nail is and just mark on each of the fingers where I'd like to shorten it. So that one's just about right over there. Then I'm going to cut the edge of each of these fingers off. It's very important then to make sure that once you've cut through it, that you then go and reinforce your stitch. So just do a forward and backward stitch over those seam lines there to make sure that it's not going to unravel. Okay, so now you can see the complete glove has been adjusted and fitted on the patient